Yo, what up gamers, I'm Dark and welcome to my patch 11.24 ADC tier list. We've only got a few changes here. Changes in the previous patch were not really that big, not too many changes. So we'll just go over the changes in the patch real quick. First we got a buff to Caitlyn, or well not too much of a buff, but like a reintroduction of a mechanic which will function as a buff. So headshot resets partially restored. The vast majority of players were not using this anyway, and I think even the players who are using it, it's still like very niche. The impact is not amazing, and like the situations which you can use it in are not like you know, that extensive. Like this has been showed by the fact that even in high reloads, Caitlyn's win rate didn't even go down when they removed this, and now that the functionality is back in, well, her win rate still hasn't really changed at all, pretty much. So I mean, so far it's actually gone down by 0.03%, which is not, it's not significant at all, but even if that ends up going up by a little bit, I'm just not expecting that to go up by much at all. Then we've also got mob buff, well, actually decent buff to Samira, I think. So R no longer costs mana. So that was a rank 1 mana cost of 100 mana, and I think that's actually pretty big that she no longer has that. It's just 0 mana cost at the moment at all, at any level, and I think that's a huge buff. Getting like all those stacks needed for your ultimate and then like not having mana to cast your ultimate. I think that's a scenario that potentially happened quite a lot in Samira, especially if you're getting like a second ult cast off. Because like overall in that kind of situation, you're using a lot of spells if you're stacking up your passive and then ulting, and then stacking up your passive and then ulting again. You know, that's a lot of mana used. Pretty decent chance you won't have mana for ultimate. This just no longer happens, and so far, her win rate did seem to be impacted pretty nicely by that. So I think it went up by about 1.2% or something. Okay, about 1%. I already think she was pretty underrated. People are always telling me, like in every single one of these patch notes, what? But Samira sucks. Samira's dog shit. Well, I think she was already like A tier, so I moved her up a little bit further up at the A tier. I still don't think it's quite S tier level, but yeah, I think she's pretty good. Then we've also got lost changes in this patch for an ADC. Oh, well, actually, there's also the lethal temp to go through. We got twist change here. So our bolt distance now scales with bonus attack range. This is actually something that I never actually thought about. But yeah, apparently Twitch's attack range, when it gets buffed up by things like lethal tempo or fire cannon, it doesn't actually buff his ultimate bolt range, which wasn't a massive thing, but it's a little bit nice for Twitch now that if his range does increase, that it will also increase the range of his ultimate. Not just as like all ultimate auto attacks, but like the pass through is what's been buffed here. It's not a big deal though. All right, like I don't think it matters at all for Twitch, honestly, because I do not recommend using lethal tempo. I don't think it's as good as Hail of Blades or PTA at the moment. And also you definitely don't want to use fire cannon either. So I really don't think that matters at all. And even when it does matter, I don't think it's a huge buff. But yeah, it's there if you do use lethal tempo. Alright, aside from that, we also have, well, a Conqueror change. This won't matter too much for most ADCs, but for the ADCs that do use Conqueror, like, well, potentially Ezreal, although I think he should always be using First Strike now. Maybe Aphelios, although I think he should also be using PTA. Well, you know, any ADC who might actually have Conqueror still as its optimal rune, they'll be a little bit better now, and maybe it'll push it into being a little bit better for those ADCs as well. Like for ADCs that don't currently use it, but maybe we'll switch over to it now. I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think I'm not sure if there's a single ADC who I would recommend using this on right now, just because like First Strike took over for quite a few. Then we've also got the lethal tempo change, which is quite a bit more relevant. So melee change doesn't matter for us. What matters is ranged attack speed per stack up from 7% to up from 5% to 7%, so 2 extra % attack speed per stack. And as a trade-off, when we're at max stacks, we lose 25 range. I'm not sure what the common consensus is, but like most of the comments that I've seen about this is that this is a nerf, because all ADCs really cared about is the range. Well, I disagree. I think people are really heavily undervaluing 2% attack speed per stack. And there's also the fact that a lot of the time you are not actually at full stacks of lethal tempo, but you're still benefiting from it because you're still like benefiting from the attack speed that you did get. And yeah, so like in any situation where you're not getting to full stacks lethal tempo, this is absolutely a buff. Sometimes only a small one, sometimes actually quite a decent buff, depending on how much you care about the attack speed, depending on whether it helps you land an extra auto attack or not, depending on whether like it helps you dodge a skill shot because you get your auto attack off faster or not. It can be very like situational whether it helps or not, but like absolutely I think this is a huge buff in certain situations where the range effect just didn't even come into play at all. And as for losing the 25 range when you are at full stacks, yep, that's actually certainly a, you know, decent nerf for well, any ADC who uses this. But, you know, at the same time, you do gain 12% total attack speed in exchange for that. And I think for sure people are undervaluing the 12% attack speed as well, because that is, you know, that is pretty much an entire alacrity almost. I think alacrity is 17.5%. This is only 5% less. People always undervalue like these small amounts of attack speed, but they're actually pretty huge in my opinion. I think there is a very big increase from 30% to 42%. And like I said, so even if you don't get the full attack speed value when you're not at full stacks, at least you're getting some value when you're not at full stacks from this buff. Whereas the range nerf just won't even apply a lot of the time. So at least I think pretty much every ADC is probably going to see a buff from this, but I could be wrong. And there might be some that get buffed and some get nerfed for this. It's hard to say without waiting for data, but that's my opinion on it. Yeah, so those are all the changes for ADC basically. So aside from that, let's see. We got Vayne. Vayne I think has become like just slightly weaker since they nerfed the objective bounties, but she's still really strong, like a lot better than she was before preseason. And her win rate this patch is actually gone up quite a bit again, and I'm guessing that's because she benefits more from the buffed lethal tempo, even if she was nerfed slightly by the nerf to the objective bounties. Yeah, for now you can see her win rate with lethal tempo seems to be up, I think. Let me just check it again. Yeah, small buff to that. It could still go down, there's not an amazing sample size, but like I'm thinking she's just as strong as last patch and probably just a little bit better. Because I do think a champion like Vayne, you know, the main reason for her going lethal tempo, she does love attack speed. The range is nice, but you know, she's a very attack speed scaling champion. So, you know, buffed attack speed on lethal tempo is certainly really huge for her. I think she cares more about the buffed attack speed than she does care about the 25 range. So, you know, it doesn't really change things overall. She was already #1 ADC on my list. She's still #1, but now she's a little bit better at being #1, you know? Then we've got Ezreal. Yeah, as I said last patch, I think the new, well, I think First Strike is basically much better than Conqueror for him. And even once they buff Conqueror this patch, I still think he will definitely want to go First Strike over Conqueror. At the moment the data supports that, but this might change throughout the rest of the patch, but I doubt the overall conclusion will be that Conqueror will be just as good as First Strike. I think First Strike is a huge buff for Ezreal, and that is putting him in S tier in my list, because Ezreal should basically never be above 50% win rate. When he's at a win rate like 51%, this always means that he's like absurdly busted because of his high skill cap. Kog'Maw, yeah, same as previous patch. Maybe I'm guessing he's probably seen a win rate increase, or will see a win rate increase from this lethal tempo change, because I did notice when I have tested Kog'Maw on the previous patch that it takes him like so long to actually stack lethal tempo while using W, that by the time W is over, he's basically got like 0 value out of the extra lethal tempo range before he already is relegated back down to 600 range because he doesn't have W active. There's a bit of an anti-synergy with this champion and lethal tempo, where you need your W to stack the lethal tempo, but the lethal tempo is most useful when you have your W active. So when your W runs out shortly after you finish stacking lethal tempo, that's kind of a bummer. So I think he definitely cares more about the buffed attack speed than he did about the full range, which, you know, the full range was always like synergizing a bit weirdly with his kit. So I think he'll probably see a win rate increase from this if he hasn't already. Actually, so far it seems to be way down. But, you know, not too much of a sample size right now. I'm guessing he is still benefiting from, like, the overall direction changes of the preseason with the objective bounties. Which, just makes healing champions better. So, I've got him still in S tier for now. We'll see if I change my mind next patch. Draven, you know, as usual, preseason changes didn't affect him too much. I don't think you saw win rate decrease this patch, or, like, throughout preseason. From the objective bounties, still seems to be pretty decent. You know, as usual, you have a lot of options for him. You can go Shield Bow into Collector, you can do Lethality, you can do Essence Reaver into like Gale Force or into Shield Bow or into Lethality. So many options on him and all are really good. Use Conqueror, can use Hail of Blades. If you use Conqueror, then you know you'll be happy about the Conqueror changes. This might be the one champion actually that still uses Conqueror in ADC. I don't know if I would recommend it or Hail of Blades though. I've been playing much Draven. Yeah, we got Misfortune, you know, same as usual. It wasn't really affected too much by the preseason changes. Was quite good before, still quite good now. You can use Lethality, you can use Crit. Use First Strike. I've been having a lot of fun with that. It's a really nice run on her. If you're using Lethality, I don't know if it's as good on Crit, but you know, even aside from that, I don't think it's like been a massive buff to her because it's pretty much just as effective as Dark Harvest probably. If you're using Lethality, if you're using Crit, you can still use Dark Harvest. You can still use ETA. Maybe you can still use First Strike. I don't know. I haven't tested that. Yeah, pretty good champion, but not quite the S tier in my books. Sivir, she's a champion who initially saw quite a big buff from the preseason changes. Her win rate was just up on every build for seemingly no reason. It did go down shortly after when they nerfed the objective bounties. I'm guessing like her wave clear was having a really big factor as to why that was. So I think she probably was like helping her team get those objective bounties when their team was behind because she had like such great pushing power. And especially she was really good at denying objective bounties from the enemy team when they were ahead, because it's just so hard to push into Sivir with her massive wave clear, whether she's building crit or lethality. So she's still quite decent, but I've relegated her down back to A tier because now that objective bounties are not so significant as they used to be, that seems to have knocked her win rate down a little bit as well. Still a bit better than she was before preseason though. I moved Samira up from like bottom of A tier to top end of A tier for the change I mentioned. Ashe, I think she's about the same strength that she was before preseason. The only main thing that affects her is that lethal tempo is now just as good as Hail of Blades was, or maybe even just a little bit better, but not by a significant deal. So I think she was like already quite good with Hail of Blades. Now she's quite good with lethal tempo as well. And that just doesn't really mean much. It just means that you have more variety in your choice of runes. So that's good news for you if you like are more of a fan of lethal tempo than Hail of Blades. But overall, just doesn't really change her viability at all. It doesn't really like to her viability. It just doesn't really matter what rune you're using. It's the same either way. But you know she's quite good. And as for how this change affects her, the new lethal tempo change, hard to say. I think she was one of the ADCs that benefited most from the increased range. She was one of the best at abusing that. But you know, extra attack speed is also really good. So far. Okay, I think that was a slight increase, but you know, it's still yeah, it was a slight increase, but it's still really early on into the patch. I don't know, like overall, whether that'll be a change that benefits her or is like bad for her or is just about neutral. I'm probably leaning more towards neutral. I don't think she cares too much. She was definitely one of the ADCs that cared the most about the range. So like, if it's gonna be a nerf or like a neutral change to anyone, it's probably gonna be that for her. Jinx, you know, same as usual. I think she's really good, really underrated with the Stormers the second build. Here we go. So, yeah, this has not changed. She didn't see a win rate increase from the preseason patch, I don't think. No, and nor did she see much of an increase with the new lethal tempo. I've tried it on her quite a bit. It feels really good on her, but for some reason just wasn't really an increase to her win rate in preseason. Probably won't be a win rate increase to her now with the change either. Probably she'll just be about neutral with it. But I still think she's in a really good spot because she's just really underrated with the Stormwizard build. And with the Stormwizard build, you can either do Infinity Edge third if you want DPS, or you can do Lord Dominic's third if you're, you know, facing really high armor or tanky comps. You can also do Fire Cannon third if you are against a really squishy comp where the poke will be like really strong. Few options there, but definitely you should be using Stormers as second pretty much every game, which I think almost nobody does, and I think that's pretty bad. I think that's definitely her best build. If it weren't for Stormwizard, I would have her in like B tier, but definitely I think she's super underrated. Aphelios, same as usual. I think a lot of people are using lethal tempo on him when they really shouldn't be. Regardless of the change this patch, it's still like really bad on him because it just doesn't synergize with his current build. which is, you know, Q max into E max. There's almost a perfectly even split between people who are still stuck with the old skilling order and people who are using like the new one, which is really not that new anymore. People should really be more aware of this already. Aphelios is amazing with any mythic into collector, specifically with this skilling order. A lot of people I've caught on and started building collector second, but like still half of them are just not doing Q into E. So his win rate is really bad, but you would see a 3% win rate increase if everybody was doing, well, almost a 3% win rate increase if more people were doing this skilling order, which is Q max into E max. You need to be doing that on Aphelios, and I think he's super good with that. Also really good with PTA. This has consistently been his best rune for quite a while, ever since the skilling order came into play. If you do Q max into E max on Aphelios, you absolutely want to be using PTA. So that's a whole bunch of factors making his win rate like lower than it should be. I think he's definitely like pretty underrated at the moment even for solo queue. We got Jhin. Yeah, I moved him up last patch from when I had him in B tier. I think maybe I was undervaluing him. Oh, well, I don't think anything has really affected him this patch. Or like in preseason. Yeah, Lethal Temp was terrible on him. Fleet Forward is fine. Dark Harvest is fine. Maybe First Strike is usable. I haven't really tried that. Yeah, still pretty good. Either with lethality, but most popular build is crit, which is probably the better build. But he's got quite a few options. So if you want to keep things simple, just always do Gale Force into Collector or Gale Force into Stormweiser. You can't really go wrong with either one of those. Yeah, so we got Caitlyn, who got buffed this patch. Like I said, I don't think she's really going to see much of a win rate increase from this patch, just because of that headshot change. It's really nice, like it makes her feel smoother, but overall just won't really affect the viability too much. I had her at the top of B tier before. I'm still keeping her at the top of B tier. She did seem to overall benefit from the preseason changes quite a bit. I'm guessing that's because of, you know, maybe same reason as Sivir, where she saw a win rate increase because of her increased ability to take turrets and also like defend turrets. Not as amazing at defending turrets as Sivir, but definitely can take turrets a lot easier. Has both really good pushing power as well as really good sieging. Still, it wasn't really like too much of an increase, but it did go up by a little bit, even though she got basically nerfed. Like right in the same preseason patch. But the win rate stayed the same, presumably because of those meta changes. And I think she'll be the same on this patch. Xayah. I think people are really still stuck on this lethality build that it's not bad, but it's not good either. This should definitely not be built anywhere near as much as it currently is. On the surface, it may look like it's better than the crit builds, but, you know, as I've always been a really big advocate of Halo Blades on Xayah, and, you know, this patch, it's absolutely no different. Same as last patch. You know, nothing changed the viability of Halo Blades Xayah this patch either. I think this is still by far the most undervalued rune on her. I'll just show this real quick. Yeah, this is super underrated rune on her, and it's mainly for crit rather than lethality. You can see suddenly you take this rune, and now it makes a lot more sense that you see Gale Force with a 2% higher win rate than the crit build. You know, it's a 53% win rate off from like the 50% that she has with lethality and Aerie, so people need to stop using that build and move to Halo Blades. So with the lethality build, she's definitely like B tier. With she might be A tier if I'm correct about the fact that Halo Blades with crit is by far her best build. But yeah, since most people are just still playing her lethality, I'm just leaving her in B tier. And I could also be wrong about her being A tier, but I don't think so. It's been pretty consistent for a really long time that Halo Blades with crit is a really underrated Xayah playstyle. You know, Tristana, same as usual. The Tristana build that I'm using right now that I'm getting a lot of success on. Well, there's two different builds that I like climbed to master with. Or one build that I climbed to master with was Kraken Slayer into Stormweiser, and then I was actually doing Navori Quick Blade's third item. I climbed to master with that build when I wasn't really having as much success with any other ADC. I think that, you know, this win rate doesn't mean anything. Nobody's building this, but for me it worked really well. I think it's definitely undervalued to an extent, but now I'm actually using a build that's slightly different, which is no Navori. I'm doing Kraken Slayer into Stormraiser into Fire Cannon, or if I need more DPS, then I do third item either Lord Dominic's or Infinity Edge. So more, basically a standard Tristana build, but with the key thing is that I do definitely build Fire Cannon at some point. Now the reason why I wouldn't do this with Navori is the whole point of Navori on Tristana is you get pretty much permanent Q uptime, and if you combine permanent Q uptime with a heavy attack speed item like Rapid Fire Cannon, as well as also having something like Stormraiser, which is pretty core on her, I would say, then you're just like at the cap of attack speed, quite a bit over the cap, or a decent amount over the cap, and that's just a waste of stats. I don't think having permanent Q uptime is as big a deal if you have Fire Cannon and Stormraiser as it is if you only have Stormraiser. So because I'm liking Fire Cannon so much right now on her, because it's like so good combined with Stormraiser, you just get a ton of fucking poke, especially when you're ahead. Then I just use Infinity Edge instead of Navori, and I just don't build Navori at any point. But you know, both builds have worked really well for me. You know, I haven't actually technically climbed to Master with the newer build, the Fire Cannon build. I've only climbed to Master with the Navori build, but also haven't really been like playing at all. My Master account is still Master. My Demon 1 account I've barely played Tristana on. But when I have played Tristana, this build felt really good for me. It's probably either just as good as the Navori build or maybe even better. And you know, it's closer to the traditional Tristana. It's definitely a lot less controversial a build than people spam pinging my Navori Cook Blades in my Master games. Yes, and it's about the same as usual. Let me just remind myself what builds are good on her right now, because I haven't been playing this champion. I think, yeah, Lethality for sure. Yeah, seems to be her best build. Kraken Slayer, regular crit items, also an option. Can do Ginsu's, can do Fire Cannon, can do Mana Moon if you're going Lethality. Can also do Mana Moon if you're doing Kraken Slayer, apparently. Also do Wit's End. Yep. That's definitely a really underrated item on her. Especially if you need DMR. Yeah, obviously, like, if you're going Lethality, a whole bunch of Lethality items are viable there. If you're going crit, then, you know, a whole bunch of attack speed items are going to be viable on her. And as for runes, quite a few people are using First Strike on her. A lot of people are still using Glacial Augment. I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea how Glacial works on her right now. But I'm guessing it's a nerf from before preseason. Actually, doesn't seem to be impacted too much. But definitely has a higher win rate right now with Fleet Footwork. I think I tried that one game on her and it felt really good. And she also has an equally good win rate with First Strike, but still that doesn't seem I mean, as Glacial, like these two runes win rates are, you know, pretty similar. Well, identical actually. But neither one is as good as Fleet Footwork. So if you're gonna be playing Sun ADC, I think whether you're going Lethality or whether you're going crit, probably Fleet Footwork will be the move. Twitch, yeah, you know, as I mentioned, I don't think the buff that he got this patch will really matter at all. Like even if you're using lethal tempo, that's barely like a buff to him. I do think the lethal tempo changes this patch are also a small buff to him, but still also nowhere near as good as the previous lethal tempo for him. And because the previous lethal tempo was actually already tied with Hail of Blades and PTA, I don't think he's actually any worse this season than he was in the previous season. He's just got one less rune choice is all. You're still going to be able to find some success on Twitch if you're using Halo Blades and PTA. I think probably Halo Blades will be the better rune. It only shows a 0.1% win rate increase. But the thing is, I've always said that AD Twitch is definitely better than AP Twitch, unless like you really need AP. And Halo Blades is the only rune that you actually use for AP Twitch. So this win rate is actually being dragged down a bit. You see that if we isolate the win rates just to Halo Blades, you can see crit is up to nearly 53% win rate on Kraken Slayer, and definitely over 53% on Guild Force. Whereas if we sort only by PTA, you know, this win rate isn't being dragged down by AP because nobody uses PTA on AP Twitch. You can see here, almost 52% on Kraken Slayer rather than being almost 53%, and almost 53% on Guild Force rather than being over 53%. So definitely, I think Halo Blades is a little bit better for AD Twitch, but he's viable with both runes, for sure. The only thing I would recommend is definitely don't use Lethal Tempo. Even on this patch, with the Lethal Tempo being slightly buffed for him, in my opinion, still probably won't be anywhere near as good. Although we still have to wait for data here. There's like no data at all yet. But I'm guessing it won't rise by much at all. Still, he's definitely decent. Actually, maybe I should just move him up for future patch, because I don't think he's actually as bad as I put him here. Maybe top of B tier might be a bit more appropriate for him. Maybe even bottom of A tier. I'll have to think about that. Kai'Sa, meanwhile, you know, she's just as bad as she was before preseason. New lethal tempo wasn't a buff to her at all, even with the current change, which buffs the attack speed for her, which I think she'll prefer a little bit. Still really bad for her compared to Hill of Blades. And the Hill of Blades builds are still pretty bad. Maybe the build that I've like been using on her for months, which is like a delayed evolves, but better threat and power spike. Maybe this build is still quite decent. But I haven't really been playing it. I can really comment on it. The win rate is still okay, but still that would still be like B tier at best. And this is quite enough meta build compared to what people do. Only 1%. There's like 12 times less people doing this build than just going for the standard quick Q level up with a weaker threat and power spike. The way most people play Kai'Sa, she's still pretty bad, I would say. But she would be especially bad with the new lethal tempo, which a lot of people are testing. Definitely don't use this. You need to use always Halo Blades. Then we got Varus. Varus, I've always thought is quite a bit undervalued with crit. At least a lot more people are starting to use crit now. Finally, it's actually overtook Duskblade finally, and I think that's even more prevalent like in recent patches. So like past 7 days. Actually, it didn't go up by much. This patch, for example, his win rate is a little bit up. And that's mainly just because there's even more people suddenly using crit compared to lethality compared to before. He can use... I think probably lethal tempo is his best rune if he's going crit. Let me just check that. Hellblade should also be an option for him though. Yeah, you can use fleet probably. There's not too much of a sample size, but I'm guessing it should be fine on a champion like him. Yeah, Hellblades is perfectly fine as well, and lethal tempo is perfectly fine too. He won't be affected much at all by the patch this change, I think. He liked the range, but he also likes the attack speed. So you can use lethal tempo if you want more scaling. You can use Hellblades if you want a better early game. Both are fine, but definitely you should be using crit, or you know, just on hit with a shield bow over lethality builds. And this style of Varus maybe deserves to be bottom of B tier actually, rather than C tier. But definitely if you're building lethality, he's like C tier or even D tier maybe. But at least finally people are moving on to on hit. And Lucian, you know, as I've been saying for the past few patches, super overrated in my opinion. He's only okay with 3 champions, and that is Nami, Soraka, and Sona. These are the only 3 champions he's okay with, and even when specifically paired with them, his win rate is still not that amazing. He is insanely niche. He can only be played with his 3 champions effectively, and even then, he's still not an S tier ADC or even an A tier ADC, in my opinion. I think he's B tier when you pair him with Nami and Sona and Soraka. And because of that nicheness, like I'm not even putting him in B tier. I'm leaving him like C tier. I think even without them though, he's not quite D tier level, but he's definitely not good. Yeah, on D tier we've got Kalista and Akshan. Both are pretty bad. Not even sure what you want to build on Akshan these days. I think either Collector second or Wits End second is fine. Seems both builds are viable on him right now, but I'll check that in a sec. Yeah, on Kalista, definitely always want to go Shield Bow. And second item can be Wits End if you need the survivability against magic damage. If you don't need to build that. You can just go straight into Rune's. Rune's is a fantastic item on her because it just massively buffs her wave clear. Also her AoE technically, if you can get multiple stacks of E onto multiple champions. But mainly for wave clear, this is just absolutely amazing. Just being able to place your E stacks on multiple minions at once. Definitely core on her. So I would definitely, if you're going to go Wits End second, then definitely you want to build Rune's third. I'm not even sure, at that point I'm not even sure if you would ever want to build Ginsu's, because I think there's not much point building too much attack speed on her, because her attack speed does get capped basically by her jump speed. Her jump speed at a certain point doesn't increase, so you only benefit more from attack speed if you stand still, which is obviously you don't get to do too much on Kalista, you just need to be bouncing around. So after like 3 attack speed items, which usually I think would be, well, aside from Shield Bow, usually would be Rune's and Wit's End. After that, you want to go into like GA or Bloodthirster. You know, items that give her survivability so she can just, you know, dash around and be aggressive. That tends to be what works best for her after the 3 item point. And yeah, lethal tempo is viable on her for sure, which I don't, well, the old one was alright on her, maybe, but I would say a little bit worse than Halo Blades. Now it's a little bit closer between them. Halo Blades is probably still quite a bit better, or a little bit better, but this is definitely a scaling option if you prefer that. But I would say definitely Halo Blade synergizes a bit better with her playstyle. I'm not sure if she's really going to care too much about the lethal tempo change this patch. I think she cares equally about the range as she does about the attack speed. Could be wrong, but even if she sees a win rate increase from caring more about the attack speed, still Halo Blades will be a little bit better, but still you can consider lethal tempo if you just like personally prefer it, or if you think that you won't be able to abuse the enemy lane matchups, you're just gonna want to go for that scaling option. Both are fine there. Yeah, let's just cover action real quick. I haven't been playing this champion in so long, so I don't know what's really going on with him bot lane these days. Yeah, after his loss changes, yeah, as you can see, about as good a win rate with Collector as with Wit's End. Also, I think he has, yeah, about as good a win rate with Qmax as he does with Emax. Akshan used to be really underrated on bot lane because a lot of people were maxing Q when Emax had like 3% higher win rate. He used to be really good with Emax. Also used to be really good with Wit's End, whereas everybody was doing Collector. Nowadays, though, just as good with both skilling orders and just as good with both builds. So not really anything making him underrated at the moment. He's just not really that great. Definitely a lot better options, but you know, he's still playable on bot lane if you do want to play him. And you can choose which playstyle suits you better, because there doesn't seem to be much of a difference right now which you play. Yeah, you can do one hit, so if you're gonna do Wit's End, then definitely I would recommend Ginsu's third item. Seems most people actually do Collector third item even if you're doing Wit's End. Like I said, I've not been playing this champion too much, and there's not exactly much data on it either. Let's check mid lane. Yeah, here it does have a slightly better win rate with Ginsu's than with Collector, and that's despite this being a much cheaper item. So yeah, I'm guessing you would want to use Ginsu's if you're using Wit's End. I think if you go for Wit's End, you want to commit to the full on-hit build. But you know, like I said, you don't have to go for the Wit's End. You can just go full bursty crit playstyle. That's perfectly fine as well. But anyway, yep, that's the end of my 11.24 tier list. So make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. Leave a comment if you want to help me out, because that helps, you know, helps my videos out in the algorithm, pushes them more for the average viewer. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. Later, gamers.